Welcome to your deep dive. Today, we're going deep into illegal immigration in South Africa. It's a tough one.
Yeah, it
He
is.
sent in a ton of sources for this one.
It's a fascinating topic for sure.
It is, yeah. First-hand accounts,
Right.
government data.
Yeah.
We're going to unpack the numbers.
Yes,
Try to get a grip on the impacts.
absolutely.
And see if there even are any solutions out there.
Or if there are even challenges in finding them.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, right off the bat.
Yeah.
It's interesting that South Africa kind of acknowledges there's an issue,
Mm-hmm.
but they're really hesitant to actually put any numbers on it.
Yeah.
And that ambiguity makes it hard to even know where to start, you know?
It's like trying to plan a road trip without knowing how far you're actually going to drive.
Exactly.
So Stats SA tells us we've got over 63 million people in the country.
Right.
That's a pretty big jump from last year.
It is.
But then we get into this whole illegal immigration thing, and
Yeah.
it's like our map just goes blank.
Exactly. It's like we're trying to put together a puzzle,
Yeah.
but we're missing half the pieces.
Right.
We know South Africa's population is growing.
Mm-hmm.
That much is clear.
Yeah.
And that population density isn't like spread out evenly across the country.
Right.
Some provinces are way more crowded than others.
Yeah.
But when it comes to illegal immigration,
Yeah.
things get really murky.
All right. So we know from the 2022 census that there were almost 4 million
Right.
foreign-born individuals in South Africa. And that's a big jump from the 2.2 million they reported in 2011.
Huge jump.
Huge jump.
Yes.
But here's the catch.
Yeah.
That number includes
Everybody.
everyone,
Right.
regardless of their legal status.
Exactly.
It's like lumping tourists in with permanent residents.
Right.
It doesn't really give us the information we need.
It's not specific enough.
No.
No, it's not.
And this lack of clarity, it's not just frustrating from like a data perspective.
Right.
It has real-world
Of
consequences.
course. Absolutely.
You know, when you have this information vacuum,
Yeah.
it just breeds anxiety,
It does.
speculation. And let's be honest,
Yeah.
it can be exploited for a political gain.
Absolutely.
And we see that playing out in some of these sources you've provided.
Yeah.
Like one in particular,
Okay.
Herman Mashaba, the leader of Action SA, claimed back in 2020 that there were like 15 million
Wow.
undocumented immigrants in South Africa.
15 million.
15 million, yeah.
That seems a little...
It sounds a bit far-fetched, doesn't it?
It does, yeah.
Yeah.
Even Stats SA's own estimate from 2015,
What?
which put the number somewhere between 500,000 and 1 million,
Okay.
seems a lot more realistic.
Yeah.
Although, of course, it's also wildly outdated.
Of course.
Yeah. But the fact that a number like 15 million
Yeah.
got any traction at all
Right.
really shows how worried people are
Yeah.
and how much they want some real information.
It's just mind-boggling to me that in 2024, we're still relying on data that's almost a decade old.
It's crazy.
You need reliable, up-to-date information
Yeah.
to even begin to tackle this effectively.
Absolutely.
Otherwise, it's like we're trying to navigate a maze in the dark.
Totally agree. And without that data,
Yeah.
it's almost impossible to figure out good policies
Right.
or even really grasp how big this situation actually is. And that leads us to
Yeah.
the Zimbabwe Dispensation Project,
Okay.
which is often just called the DZPs.
The DZP. Okay.
This has been a huge factor
Okay.
in shaping how immigration works in South Africa.
Okay, so the DZP, it was launched back in 2009,
Mm-hmm.
and it was basically a way to try and regularize
Yeah.
Zimbabweans
Okay.
who were living in South Africa without the proper documentation.
Right.
The goal was to give them work permits,
Yeah.
reduce the number of deportations, and offer amnesty to anyone who might have gotten documents fraudulently.
Right.
You know, it was really a humanitarian response
Yeah.
to all the political and economic turmoil that was happening in Zimbabwe
At the time.
at the time, yeah.
Exactly.
But it's interesting, the program's kind of evolved over the years,
Oh, it has.
you know?
Yeah.
It started as a Zimbabwe dispensation project,
Yeah.
then morphed into the Zimbabwe special permit,
Mm-hmm.
and then the exemption permit.
Yep.
So it's been adapted, you know, over time.
It has. It's been interesting to see how it's changed.
Yeah.
But one of the sources you sent
Yeah.
brings up a really interesting point.
Oh, yeah.
It says that only about 20%
Oh, wow.
of the people who have these permits
Like-
are actually eligible for, like, mainstream visas.
Now, that's a concerning statistic.
Yeah.
Makes you wonder, what's the long-term impact of all this?
Right.
Are these programs really benefiting South Africa?
Good question.
Like, was the intention to attract skilled labor?
Yeah.
Or did we unintentionally create a situation where there's a huge influx of low-skilled workers?
That's the million rand question, isn't it?
It is.
And it feeds into all those anxieties
Right.
that South Africans are feeling about job security and how resources are allocated
Exactly.
in the country.
And it highlights the need for some clear,
Yes,
well-defined immigration policies.
absolutely.
We need to be asking ourselves some tough questions.
We do.
What kind of workforce does South Africa need to
Yeah.
thrive? How can we balance our commitment to humanitarian aid
Yeah.
with the economic realities on the ground?
Right.
These are complex issues,
They are.
and they require a careful, nuanced approach.
I agree. And
Yeah.
those anxieties and those questions,
Mm-hmm.
they're made even more complicated
Yeah.
by the financial side of it all.
Right.
So let's talk about the costs
Okay.
of managing illegal immigration.
Yeah.
Because the numbers are pretty eye-opening.
Yeah, the sources we have paint a pretty stark picture
They do.
when it comes to deportations.
Mm-hmm.
Before the DZP even existed,
Okay.
South Africa was deporting over 250,000 people
Wow.
every year.
Every year.
Every year, yeah.
That's a lot.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
That number's dropped significantly
Okay.
to about 83,000 between January of 2022
Mm-hmm.
and just last month, October 2024.
Okay.
But even with that decrease,
Yeah.
the cost is still huge.
Right. Our sources say the government has spent almost $200 million on
Wow.
deportations just since 2022.
Okay.
And that works out to about $2,700 per person.
Per person.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's before we even factor in places like
Yeah.
the Lindela Repatriation Center,
Oh, yeah?
which housed a crazy number of people
Ah.
between 2017 and 2022.
Yeah, over 76,000 people were detained at Lindela
That's a lot of people.
in those 5 years alone.
Yeah.
And running that facility costed whopping
Bro.
$450,000
Per
day every single day.
Wow.
It's no wonder some members of parliament are getting concerned.
Yeah.
They're seeing a lot of money being spent
Mm-hmm.
to deport a relatively small number of people.
Yeah,
It's a bit of a catch-22.
it really is.
If we were to, like, try and figure out what it would cost
Okay.
to deport everyone, based on even the most conservative estimates,
Yeah.
let's say 1 million people,
Right.
we're talking our $2.7 billion
Yeah,
for deportations alone.
just for that.
Yeah, and if the number is closer to 5 million,
Mm-hmm.
as some sources suggest,
Right.
then the cost could be as high as our 13 billion.
It's a lot of money.
Those numbers are staggering.
They are.
It makes you wonder if there are more cost-effective ways
Yeah,
to approach this.
absolutely.
Maybe focusing more on border security
Mhm.
or even tackling the root causes of migration in neighboring countries?
Yeah, those are definitely things we need to consider.
Yeah.
But before we jump ahead
Okay.
and start talking about solutions,
Yeah.
there's another piece of this puzzle.
Okay.
We need to look at
All right.
the role South African businesses play. Okay.
And employing undocumented workers.
Now, this is where things get really interesting.
It does.
It's one of the sources you shared
Yeah.
talks about a bunch of raids that happened just last month
Oh, wow.
in September of 2024.
Okay.
They targeted businesses in the hospitality industry.
Interesting.
And what sparked these raids is crazy.
What was it?
A waitress took to TikTok
No way.
to expose some really shady labor practices
Wow.
at the restaurant where she worked.
What did she say was going on?
It's wild. She claims she had to buy her own uniform
Seriously?
and even the tools she needed to do her job.
Oh, wow.
Things like bottle openers
Okay.
and cutters.
Wow.
She said there was no basic salary.
no basic salary.
No.
Wow.
And she was actually forced to pay a portion of her tips
You're kidding?
back to the restaurant
Seriously?
and cover the cost of any breakages.
That's terrible.
It is. It's unbelievable.
It is.
It's amazing how one little video on social media
I know, right?
can have such a ripple effect. It's crazy.
Her story just blew up,
Mm-hmm.
and it prompted the Department of Employment and Labor
Right.
to launch a whole investigation.
And what did they find?
They inspected over 2,600 businesses,
Wow.
and they found that almost 49% weren't following labor laws.
That's almost half of them.
It's crazy, right?
It is.
They ended up arresting 81 foreign nationals
Okay.
who didn't have the proper documentation to be working in the country.
So this issue is way more widespread than people realize.
Yeah, it seems to be. It really does.
So why are businesses going to all this trouble
Right.
to employ undocumented workers?
Well, the answer often comes down to one thing:
What's that?
cost.
Okay.
Undocumented workers are often willing to work for less money
Right.
and under much worse conditions
Yeah.
than South African citizens.
Right.
And that creates a messed up incentive for some businesses.
It does.
They can exploit the situation,
Yeah.
cut their costs,
Mm-hmm.
increase their profits.
Right.
It's a vicious cycle.
It is.
Exploitation leads to fewer jobs for South African citizens,
Yeah.
which then fuels resentment and anger towards immigrants.
Of course.
And the current penalty for employing undocumented workers
Yeah.
is a measly R$2,500.
Yeah.
It's nothing.
It's a slap on the wrist.
It's a joke.
It is.
It
It's a complicated web
is.
of economic and social factors that we gotta untangle
We do.
if we want to find any real lasting solutions.
Absolutely.
And that's something we'll dive into
Okay.
in the next part of our deep dive.
Oh, okay.
We've laid the groundwork.
Yeah.
We've seen the data, or the lack thereof.
Right.
And we've gotten a glimpse of the human stories
Yeah.
behind the numbers. So
Mhm.
now it's time to ask ourselves,
Right.
what can be done?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
Okay, so we've kind of laid out the challenges, right? When it comes to illegal immigration in South Africa,
Mm-hmm.
we've talked about the gaps in the data,
Right.
the complexities of these policies, like the DCP, the financial strain of deportations, and the whole issue of businesses exploiting undocumented workers.
Right.
So now the big question,
Okay.
what are some potential solutions?
Well,
Yeah.
sometimes you've got a problem,
Yeah.
and it just seems so massive,
Right.
so tangled,
Mm-hmm.
that you don't even know where to start.
Exactly.
And that's kind of where we are right now.
Yeah, it can feel overwhelming.
It really can.
Yeah.
But thankfully, the sources you've provided
Okay.
give us at least a few places to start.
Okay, good.
At least a few ways to get a grip on this.
Yeah, and some of them are pretty ambitious.
They are.
Like the Department of Labor,
Okay.
they've got this plan to drastically increase the number of labor inspectors.
Okay.
We're talking a 10-fold increase.
Seriously.
Yeah, from 2,000 inspectors to 20,000
Wow.
within the next 3 years.
That is ambitious.
It is.
That's a massive workforce.
It is.
It sounds like they're really serious about cracking down on those businesses
It's a...
that are hiring undocumented workers.
Yeah.
But I can't help but wonder,
Yeah.
wouldn't creating such a huge bureaucratic system
Right.
just be a logistical nightmare?
It could be. Yeah.
Could it even be managed effectively?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I mean, efficiency and accountability would be absolutely crucial
Oh, yeah.
for a system like that to actually work.
Right.
But there's no denying the current system with those tiny fines,
Yeah.
it's not working.
No, it's not.
So maybe a better approach
Okay.
would be to hit those businesses where it really hurts
Okay.
their bottom line.
Right. I like it.
So what if the penalties
Yeah.
were calculated as a percentage
Okay.
of the company's annual revenue?
Now that's a penalty with some teeth.
Right.
It would definitely make businesses think twice
Yeah,
about hiring undocumented workers.
absolutely.
But this brings up a topic
Okay.
that always seems to get people riled up.
Yeah, what's that?
What about a border wall?
The wall. Yeah.
The Trumpian solution, some
Yeah.
might call it.
Right.
It's definitely controversial.
It is.
Yeah, our sources estimate that securing just the most vulnerable parts
Of the-
the border with Zimbabwe, Lesotho, Eswatini, and Mozambique.
Okay, so we're talking about
It would cost around R$5 billion.
our $5 billion.
Yeah.
And for how much of the border?
For about 1,900 kilometers.
Okay, so not even the whole thing.
No, not even close.
It's a massive undertaking,
It is.
both logistically
Yeah.
and financially.
Mm-hmm.
But is a wall really a foolproof solution?
Well, history kind of tells us that people find ways,
They do.
where there's a will, there's a way.
Exactly.
To find a way over, under, through.
Exactly. And then there's the cost of maintaining it.
Right.
The patrols.
Mhm.
It just feels like a Band-Aid
It does, yeah.
at best.
And we can't ignore the optics either, right?
Right.
I mean, building a wall,
Okay.
especially in this global climate,
Yeah,
it sends a very specific message.
it does.
It could be seen as isolationist,
Right.
even hostile towards our neighbors.
Yeah, and it doesn't address
Right.
root causes
Exactly.
why people are migrating in the first place.
Right. The poverty,
Yeah.
the conflict,
Mm-hmm.
and more the effects of climate change.
Exactly.
Those are huge factors.
And haven't we already tried this?
What do you mean?
Didn't we try to build a border fence
Oh, right.
during the lockdown If I remember correctly, that was a complete waste of money.
It was a disaster.
Yeah.
Millions of rands down the drain
Exactly.
for very little actual border security.
It shows you just how important transparency is and accountability
Absolutely.
when it comes to these big infrastructure projects.
Agreed, but I do think there's a valid argument
Oh,
for stronger border security,
okay.
even if a wall isn't the answer.
So you're saying
Yeah.
that while a wall may not be effective,
Right.
there are benefits to securing our borders.
Beyond just immigration control.
Beyond just that, yeah.
Okay, like what?
Well, a well-secured border could help with cross-border crime.
Yeah.
Things like smuggling,
Right.
human trafficking,
Mm.
vehicle theft.
Okay.
It also reinforces South Africa's sovereignty.
Okay.
Gives the government more control
Yeah.
over who comes and goes.
I see your
It's not just about being pro-wall or anti-wall.
Right.
There are a lot of nuances.
There are.
Yeah.
It seems like a lot of the potential solutions
Mm-hmm.
are complex,
They are.
and they come with their own sets
Yeah.
of pros and cons.
Yeah.
It's not a simple issue.
It's not black and white.
No.
Not at all.
It's very gray.
Very gray.
But one thing seems clear.
What's that?
If we want a solution
Mm-hmm.
that's going to work
Yeah.
and be sustainable,
Mm-hmm.
it needs to be comprehensive.
Absolutely.
It can't just focus on one thing.
It's got to address everyone's needs.
It's exactly
South
that.
African citizens
Yeah.
and those who have immigrated here legally. Exactly.
And that brings us back
Okay.
to that one piece we keep bumping up against,
Mhm.
the need for good data.
The data, right?
We can't make good decisions.
They can't.
We can't even have productive conversations
Right.
without really understanding the scale of the situation.
Right. So how many undocumented immigrants are there?
Exactly.
Where are they coming from?
Mm-hmm.
What impact are they having?
Exactly.
Those are the questions we need to answer.
We do.
And once we have that information,
Yes.
then we can have those real honest conversations
We need-
about our immigration policies.
Absolutely.
We need to ask ourselves
Yeah,
as a
yeah.
nation,
Uh,
what kind of future do we want?
What are our priorities?
What are our priorities? Exactly.
Yeah.
And how do we balance all these competing interests?
It's about finding solutions
Yes.
that work for everyone.
And one concept keeps coming up,
What's that?
this idea of open borders.
Right. Open
Yeah.
borders.
It's often talked about as a Pan-African ideal,
It is.
but some of the sources you sent
Yeah.
suggest that it might not be feasible
Right.
given where things are economically.
Right.
Like Hopewell Chinano,
Okay.
he's a journalist.
Mm-hmm.
He makes a pretty compelling argument.
Okay. What does he say?
He says until there's more economic equality
Okay.
between African countries,
Mm-hmm.
open borders would just put way too much pressure
Okay.
on the more developed countries,
Right.
like South Africa.
Yeah.
It's like asking one person
Yeah.
to carry the weight of 10.
Right.
His point is, without a more level playing field,
Yeah.
open borders could just lead to a massive influx of people
Okay.
from less developed countries into South Africa.
I see.
And, while South Africa has always been welcoming to
Yeah.
migrants and refugees,
Mm-hmm.
that kind of influx would put a huge strain on everything.
On resources.
Resources.
Infrastructure.
Yeah. It's not about turning our backs on our neighbors
Right.
or rejecting this idea of Pan-African unity.
Right. Exactly.
It's about recognizing that there could be consequences
Yeah.
and making sure any policy decisions
Mm-hmm.
take those economic realities into account.
It's about being realistic.
It is.
Yeah. It's not about being anti-immigrant.
Right.
It's about being pro-South Africa.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
about making sure our policies are sustainable
Mm-hmm.
and that they create a situation that benefits everyone.
That's the key.
It is.
So we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
We've talked about data,
Yeah.
policies,
Yeah.
the scale of this issue.
It's a big one.
It's huge.
It is.
But at the end of the day,
Yeah,
this deep dive is really about the people.
it is.
The human side of this story.
Absolutely.
So I want to ask you directly,
Okay.
what stood out to you the most?
From all this information,
Yep.
honestly, it's the human cost
Okay.
that really gets to me.
Yeah.
We're not just talking about numbers on a page or
Right.
debates about policy.
Mm-hmm.
These are real people
They are.
with real lives, hopes, dreams,
Yeah.
who are stuck in the
Mm.
middle of this incredibly complex situation.
Right.
Whether they're looking for a better life for their families
Yeah.
or running from hardship
Mm.
or just trying to survive.
Yeah.
We have to approach this issue with empathy.
With empathy and
But
understanding.
an understanding, exactly.
And we can't forget that South Africa
Yeah.
has a long history of welcoming migrants and refugees.
As does.
We have a moral obligation to treat people with dignity and respect,
Absolutely.
regardless of their legal status.
I agree.
But we also have a responsibility to our own citizens
Of course.
to make sure our social and economic systems are strong and stable.
It's about finding that balance,
It is.
that middle ground.
Yeah.
And that's going to take honesty,
Mhm.
a willingness to listen,
Yeah.
and a commitment to finding solutions.
Solutions that work for everyone.
For everyone,
We
exactly.
can't just ignore this
We can't.
and hope it goes away.
No.
The longer we wait,
Yeah,
the more divided everyone becomes.
it's true.
And it just makes finding common ground impossible.
Exactly. And while we're busy debating,
Yeah,
real people are paying the price.
they are.
Families are being separated.
Mm-hmm.
People are losing their livelihoods.
Yeah.
We're in danger of losing our humanity
You're right.
amidst all the political noise.
So how do we move forward?
That's the question, isn't it?
It is.
What do you hope people take away from this deep dive?
I hope they walk away feeling more informed,
Okay.
more engaged,
Yeah.
more empowered
Mm-hmm.
to be part of the solution.
I like that.
Because this isn't a problem that one person or one
It's going
group
to take all of us.
can solve on their own.
It's going to take all of us working together.
It's going to take a collective effort,
It is.
a willingness to listen,
Yeah.
and a commitment to finding common ground.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
It's about recognizing that we're all in this together.
We are.
The future of South Africa depends on it.
It does.
Our ability to handle these tough issues
Yeah.
with compassion, wisdom,
And a shared purpose.
and a shared purpose.
Exactly.
This deep dive has been a journey through the data,
Mm-hmm.
the policies,
Yeah.
the human stories.
Absolutely.
And it's given us a lot to think about,
It has.
but it's also given us hope.
I agree.
Hope that we can find a way forward
Yeah.
together
Together.
through dialogue
Mm-hmm.
and a willingness to listen.
I think we can.
I think we can too.
Yeah.
So thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been great talking about this.
It has.
Yeah.
But